It is an absolute bloodbath in Jacksonville for the flipping, wholesaling investor market. There's no other way to put it. It is an absolute bloodbath.
Pat, you might be the only person who's ever texted me and said you actually agree with me that there's going to be a 30% price drop in Jacksonville. I feel like a lot of people either ignore the news or just pretend it's not real and hide. I don't know, whatever you think that might be, but are we in for a 30% drop from the peak in October 2022?
I think a lot of it is groupthink too, John. We're in the real estate space. I talk to a lot of developers, a lot of builders, a lot of flippers, and the national data would not say that, right? And everyone is kind of, in my opinion, a lot of people are burying their heads in the sand and just trying to act like it's business as usual when I have a lot of listings on the market right now, and I know it's not. So that's why when my wife was gone this weekend and I was listening to your stuff and reading your stuff, I felt the need to text you because you're very aligned with exactly what I think is going to happen.
I think it's different because we see what's actually happening on the ground day to day, right? We've got 250 plus real estate agents. You have your team is massive. We are constantly dealing with buyers and sellers on the ground here in Jacksonville, Florida every day. And I think other people, they might only have like a very small view of the market, while ours is probably a little bit wider. Also, I think you're right. People are sticking their head in the sand where they just don't want to believe the reality, and they're praying that interest rates come down. In some of our conversations that we have with other investors in this, like groups that were in like abundance, people, are losing their fortunes basically on their commercial real estate, and they refuse to acknowledge that they need to write down their asset values, and they still believe that they have all this massive amount of net worth from buying real estate assets, and it's just completely collapsed simply in the last basically year and a half.
Right. You have a ton of agents, so you see what's happening. We have a small amount of agents, but a lot of listings. We have 80 to 100 listings at any time in the market. So we can every single week we're tracking showing volume and offers coming in. And so I think we're way ahead of the data because we're seeing everything that's happening right now. And yes, it's been incredibly slow. And when I read your predictions last week, I had just said something very similar to our team of what I think is going to happen in the next 12 months. So I felt very aligned there.
Awesome. So what will happen in the next 12 months? So before we jump into your prediction here, let's look at what happened, right? We're obviously far and beyond 2006, 2007, 2008 bubble here. And we had these ZIRP, the zero interest rate policy that basically pushed in 2020 to 2022 asset prices just through the moon. I know here in Jacksonville, we had price appreciation of 52% within 5 years, which is crazy, right? We had a ton of relocations. We had easy money. The builders went crazy and overbuilt multifamily and some single family properties. Nothing is affordable anymore to the average local who's actually living here. What is your prediction in for the next 12 months?
52% appreciation. The majority of it was in 2021, 2022, right? We're talking about 40% during that time period.
Yes.
And you mentioned mass migration to Florida. Yes, that's part of it. But I think the bigger part of it was in the zero interest rate environment, this institutional capital that flooded into residential real estate and could not get them up. Jacksonville was arguably one of the hottest parts of the country for institutional capital flow in and buy single family houses. And it was absolutely out of control. I think we're going to get into my flip margins during that time period later, but we were selling we were buying 40 to 50 houses a month, packaging them in groups of 15 or 20, and we were selling them to institutions unrenovated for 110% of Zillow value. So your amount and incomes did not rise during that time period, but you had that massive appreciation because any investor could just buy a house and a month later sell it to Open Door and make 30 grand. Like that is not sustainable, and it's kind of a shame because you're just mom and pop that's living, or your young family that's living in Jacksonville working a normal job is now competing with BlackRock to buy a single family house, and it was just out of control. When you say a 30% price correction, it sounds horrible, But I think a lot of the appreciation during that time period was not even real, right? It's just because so much capital was flowing into Jacksonville. You still have just regular, maybe that 10% appreciation. We talk about dropping 30%. That last 10% was maybe real sustainable appreciation. But that 30% that we're dropping is not a real drop. That's just the fabrication slowly going away. So I'm still incredibly bullish on Jacksonville. Here's my prediction for the next 12 months.
Right.
And this is why I think it's a very boring prediction. So it doesn't do good for headlines or any of that. But what I think is going to happen is I think your 30% number is right. Because as I said before, that 40% appreciation was not real. So we need to get back to normal. So our prediction, what we think is going to happen is we think we're going to lose a point over the next 9 months, is 9, 10 months. And maybe we lose another 5%, maybe lose another 10, but I think it's going to happen slowly
Yes.
over the next year or so. You lose 75 basis points 1 month. It just keeps going down and you keep getting less showings and there's less buyer volume. And then we're going to get to a point where maybe it is that 30 or maybe it's 25 where we start to get to equilibrium again. The public home builders are already backing out of contracts and retrading left and right. Townhouse deals are dead. You cannot sell a townhouse deal right now. Dead. Done. So builders are slowing down how much they're building. So
Yes.
we continue to drop, and then we're going to get to a point of equilibrium because the supply is very much slowing down. And once we're there, I'm still incredibly bullish on Jacksonville. I think next summer, maybe start of Q3, we hit that equilibrium. Absorption rate just kind of stays stable. Maybe we say stable at 6 months of inventory, but then the supply matches the demand. And then at that point, I think it stays level for a little bit. But Jacksonville is a very growing city. There's a lot going on downtown. Florida is very business friendly. We're going to continue to have migration and grow. And I think this time the growth is going to be stable, nice and stable and slow at first, maybe 1, 2% a year. And I think it's going to be very boring for the next 5 years, which is great for businesses because it's a lot more predictable, it's less volatile, and that would be my prediction. I think we still have a little bit more to go to the bottom, but once we hit the bottom, and we're not hugely far off, we're going to have nice stable growth in Jacksonville.
Yeah, we need a little reset. As you said, it's artificial growth in price. And I feel bad for the people that bought in the last 2 years, right? They're underwater immediately. Maybe their FHA, they didn't put a lot of money down and they get caught at the top of the cycle. But I mean, if they're staying in their house for 10 to 15 years, they should be okay.
I think
The
so.
market won't stay down forever. We are going to experience inflation with the amount that, Congress and the government is printing. There's no way that we're not going to have inflation come through at some point and pick this up. But we are in an oversupply period right now.
Yes.
Absolutely. The builders overbuilt multifamily. We're one of the worst cities in the country for multifamily overbuild. Rents are coming down. So when I look at the model that I'm creating for why I think real estate asset prices in Jacksonville and in Florida will come down, I'm comparing it to two things. Number one is an investor point of view where I can get $300 a month cash flow. That's my standard as an investor. And then number two, it needs to compare with what I can rent the property for. So for example, a lot of cases right now in Jacksonville, you can buy a property and you'll be paying $500 a month more than just renting the same exact property. And you don't have any of the overhead associated with it, any of the risk with it. And so right now it actually makes more sense in a lot of cases, not every case. It depends if you get with a great agent, you buy in the right price range, right area, you can still absolutely have a good, comparison of rent versus own. But a lot of cases, it does make more sense to rent. You can negotiate like crazy on the rental side. There's people flipping signs on the corner of our street out here where they'll give you 3 months free rent. And, you basically don't even have to put any money down as long as your credit is there and you have a good rental record. I mean, people are begging for tenants right now. And I feel that the market hasn't even started to slide. And we're starting to see it come up in the data. But as you said, I think we're probably 3 to 6 months ahead in terms of data of the rest of the market. I really have felt that way my entire career in real estate, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
because people are like, "What are you talking about?" And then literally 6 months later, they'll be like, "Yeah, you said this was gonna happen 6 months ago." It's like, it's because we're paying attention to every little thing that happens in the market, right? We have people out there who are doing open houses every single weekend on 100 plus properties, and they're reporting in how much
Yeah.
activity each one's getting. They're reporting in how many times they've asked for price improvements on their house. We see this full time. Like right now, in the last week, 30% of properties in Northeast Florida had a price improvement in 1 week, right? And we're seeing inventory not go up because, Pat, we're seeing a bunch of properties come off of the market because people are frustrated they're not getting the price that they want, and they're hoping that they'll get a higher price next year. Do you think that's a good idea?
No, I don't. I think they should be realistic and sell as it is. It is because I think the number will be a little lower next year. You mentioned competing hard for renters. The competition for home buyers is way more aggressive than that right now. Rents, I've actually seen start to stabilize a little bit. I think we're starting to hit supply demand equilibrium there. There's certain parts of town that are renting better, but as far if you are in the market to buy a house right now, like the incentives that you can get from these public home builders and even the smaller private guys like me, like we have no power. Absolutely no power. And what a great time, just general Warren Buffett thing. When everyone's running away, run to it. Everyone's scared to buy a house right now because of Trump and tariffs and all the economic volatility. But I'm telling you right now, if you are a person that is thinking about buying a home in Jacksonville, you can absolutely, we've already said we don't think it's going to go that much further down, and you can crush it on incentives right now. If you were looking to buy a new house, you can crush it on price. People will buy down your interest rates. You can get 5% concessions. You have full control if you can qualify right now. And guess what? You don't like a 6.5% rate? Refinance in 3 years. Who cares? Or get the builder to buy you down. Like you have all the power as a buyer right now. So I think like even though things aren't great, and we're talking about this podcast about maybe another 5 or 10% we have to lose. What a great time to buy a house, in my opinion.
You can definitely negotiate with the builders. We have
Oh yeah.
reports where you can get $150,000 off their list price. They'll buy your rate down to 3.99%. And that does start making it make sense versus renting. So
Yes.
you have a really good point there. And if you're able to put 20% down as well. And again, my thing is if you buy and you want to sell in 2 years, it's probably not the right time, right? It's probably better to wait. It's not, you're not going to see the appreciation because when you go in to buy and sell, when you buy, you're going to pay about 3 to 4%. And when you sell, you're going to pay 6 to 7%.
Yep.
You're just not going to see that price appreciation in that short period of time. But if you stay there for 10 to 15 years and you're doing the principal pay down, you're getting the interest deduction, you're getting the benefits of home ownership, I think it does make a lot of sense. But the builders are getting crushed. We're seeing incentives, as you said, $50,000, $70,000 of either upgrades or appliances, repair, escrow credit. I mean, it's like crazy to be able to get buyers in a situation where the payment does make sense because we live in a payment economy. And so if we can get the payments to make sense for people versus renting, and they can think that this is a place that they want to be long term, that's great. But I still believe we're in a monster bubble. So my models, when I look at it financially, and I should probably show these at some point, but it's 31 to 42% drop from the peak of 2022. In Jacksonville, I think that most communities were down at least 10% from the peak. Some communities are down 15%. If you're close to a new construction builder, they're holding on because the last thing they want to do is reduce the price. They don't want to reduce the price because then that causes appraisal problems for the rest of the community. If the market comes back for some reason, that would be really bad for them. And they'd rather give the incentives. It's cheaper to give you a rate buy down than to lower the price. So, Pat, let's talk about your business because I think it's really interesting. You had this flipping business in Jacksonville.
Yep.
You're kind enough to share this information and kind of give people an insight to what these hedge funds were doing, these institutional investors that would buy these properties, single family properties, primarily 2,000 or less square feet, right? They had a specific buy box, a certain age, and you were closing so many deals. Not only you, there were other wholesalers. They were flying off the shelf. They were basically making offers on every property that hit their buy box. every single day they were outbidding first-time home buyers and creating this, kind of artificial massive inflation in such a short period of time. And your business thrived with that, which is awesome. And you were able to help facilitate those deals. Talk to us about what it looked like in 2022 when they started raising interest rates. What happened?
This is a great slide to show how screwed up things were and why we need to come back 30%. You see, Q1 of 2022, things were on fire. We did 125 deals, and your average profit on each of those deals was $40,000. That means about half of those was way more than that. And we were not renovating a lot of these houses. We were buying them and selling them as packages. It was, you want to talk about bubble?
Yeah.
That's what this was. So Q2, things started to slow down a little bit. I think the first interest rate bump was early that year. It was 25
March.
bips or 25 bips or something in March. You see 25% reduction right there. Then in June was the kill shot, 50 bips in June that year. And you see we dropped about 30% flip margins from there.
Brutal.
And then it just got worse from there in that business model and moved down to, got basically cut in half in Q4. And the market didn't tank that fast. Our business model of selling to institutional capital did, but retail was still pretty good through the end of 2022. You could still renovate and sell yourself out of it because the mortgage rates didn't get hit until after that. So that's a little delayed, but this is a great slide to show why we appreciated 40% in a 2-year time period. It was a wild ride.
Yeah, and then so at a certain point, I mean, you had this massive team, right? That was out there crushing it. And then I remember you saying, "Hey, we need to downsize the team because the margins aren't there." Obviously, you still had your core flipping business that wasn't to institutional investors. What was that like? I mean, you have to pivot quickly when you go from 40,000 to 8,000 to basically break even on every single deal. What is that like?
It was a stressful time because at our peak, we had 55 people and a great leadership team. And I think you have two options, and neither option is right or wrong. It just has to do with who you are. If you have a fantastic team and your current business model, you see it slowly dying, you have to make a move. And you need a new vision, and you need a new path forward, and you need to get the whole team behind you, and you need to drive through that new goal or that new opportunity in the market. I was kind of in that camp. I had a business partner on the time at a time that was in a different camp, which is also just as correct, just a different mindset, who wanted to kind of slow down, let's do some layoffs and cut the team and go back to, hey, let's figure it out and take our time with this. Both are fine options. It just depends on which way you want to go. If you value your team and where you're going, maybe you can do a lesser bit of a layoff and change directions, or you just go to zero and wait it out. That just is a big personal preference thing.
Yeah, and there was a lot of flippers. I mean, basically every flipper that I saw that had a large operation basically cut their team down to a skeleton crew within a short period of time, and just were trying to figure it out. Now, for the flippers that are out here today, they're still struggling. I mean, I see agents because they bought too high and they got trapped, and then the renovations were too high, and then properties are sitting on the market a little bit longer than they expected. What's your advice to a flipper out there today who's trying to, make that $30,000-$40,000 spread?
It is an absolute bloodbath in Jacksonville for the flipping, wholesaling investor market. There's no other way to put it. It is an absolute bloodbath. Mm. It is it's very, very difficult now. What's my advice? I can tell you what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're leaning in as a lot of people are leaning out, but we're leaning in, not crushing it by any means.
Right.
If we're making 15, 20 grand net flipping a house right now, we are high-fiving all the way out the door. There's plenty we lose on. Plenty. It's like, Murray Hill is one specific Jacksonville market that's been hot for the past decade, dead now. And if we make a buying decision 6 months ago and it gets worse and worse and worse month over month, suddenly a deal you thought you were going to make 20 grand on, you're losing 10 or 15. And that is where I think people are getting hit, because Jacksonville was such a fantastic flipping market, and we have such a great ecosystem here that everyone like got to know these submarkets so well, and people are buying based on, last year's numbers or the year before, and they're losing 15, 20 grand each. So I read an article on LinkedIn recently, and it was this author that I read a lot of her stuff, and she had a quote at the end that I thought just nailed it. It says, if you're still underwriting deals like it's 2021 or 2022, you're literally setting money on fire. Those that live in reality now and continue to squeeze out yield in this difficult environment will crush it on the next cycle.
Yep.
So that is our focus. We are not at all crushing it right now, at all, on the new construction side or the flipping side. But we're grinders. We're not sending out $500,000 a month in mail anymore. We're doing the grinding work of the cold calling to find these lots, to find these developments. And what we're doing is we're working 10 times as hard for 1/10 of the money.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of people drop out. It's like, man, I'm having to work way too hard to find that $25,000 flip. And I get it. I completely get it. It is a time period to survive and be happy with your shitty margins and squeeze out yield so you can come out the other end. So what we're doing right now is just the grinding stuff. We're knocking on foreclosure doors. We're calling people that own lots. And we're doing all that kind of grinding stuff. It's nothing secret. There's no secret list or anything. If you Google how do you find discounted real estate, we're doing all of those things. And we have a high level of accountability. What happens in markets like this is the best operators survive, right? The operators that look at their expenses every month, that look at real returns, that live in reality, that price things to sell and just live in reality and squeeze out that low margin during this time period. And that is completely my mindset. It's not complete survival mode, but I do not want a house. If a house is sitting with no showings, like that price is getting dropped. Like we're not in the business of letting houses sit on the market.
That's the exact same thing that it is on the real estate agent side. It's all about getting gritty. There were stats that came out this morning that showed that the number of closed sales July 2025 versus 2019 we're down 22% before 2020 time period. And we were in 2019 in a hard market. I don't know if you remember the end of 2019. We thought we were all going into a recession. It was starting to look a little shaky. And it's already 22% worse than that market in terms of number of closed sales. So it's like feast or famine for the real estate agents out there. And they're having a hard time because we're actually, having our agents put in their contracts now that they need, if they're going to cancel their listing or they're going to expire their listing, they still need to get paid $3,000 to $4,000 because it is a tremendous amount of money and time and energy to have a house listed for 6 months. The showings, the feedback, the going over and visiting the house, the conversations about pricing. I mean, it's like, tremendous amount of time, and they need to be compensated at something. And the sellers are just completely unrealistic about where we're at with things, and it takes many conversations, and then they're like, you know what, I got a 2% rate, I'm just gonna stay, I don't really need to sell, especially with the older generations that are kind of locked in, and if they don't have to move, but the people who have to move right now, it is a tough place to see, and that's why we're not seeing inventory go up right now. We're seeing so many expired and canceled every single week that we're not seeing the spike to 20,000 listings that I was expecting, because I did not account for the fact that people, if they got frustrated, they would just take their house off of the market. Well, pretty interesting.
It is interesting. One thing I'll say on a philosophical front, just business owner wise in this market is personally, I graduated college in 2009. So really hard to fuck up any sort of real estate deal in 2009, right? I've only seen up and to the right. That's all I've seen in my entire career. I'm not one of the guys that have been through the financial crisis. I haven't. I've only seen good times. And I've been warned about this my entire career. And it's exciting now to be in this correction. But it's weird, right? Because I know this is good for us. I know it's right for the city. I know it's right for the market. I see what's happening internally here with the organization is we're getting better. Like every time we lose 10 grand building a house, we get better. We do a post-mortem. We get better at product choice. We get better at what we're paying. We get better at the way we get our debt. We get better at selling. So this is fortifying our operation and making us better. And I try to keep that mindset because it is emotionally strenuous to know that like this is very good for us and it's good for the market, but you still have to look at that P&L every single month and see what's happening. So I think looking at it, I know it's emotionally painful. And like you said, it's funny on the agent side, they're having to do way more work for way less money, right? And but I think it's healthy and I think it's good to look at as listen, if you can survive times like this and you look at it as it's hardening and fortifying your organization more than woe is me, this should sell for this because something sold for this 3 months ago. Like boo hoo, like things aren't moving. Why am I not getting showings? Everyone else is wrong and I'm right about pricing. Rather than looking at it like that, look at it as such a great opportunity to make your organization better for the long term. That's how we look at it.
Yeah, you gotta become scrappy, and by the way, you don't really have a choice
No,
because
you
it
don't.
is what it is. Now, what I like about your organization is you're trying to solve an affordability problem, and that's why I wanted to bring up this chart. This is the median home payment amount to the median household income, right? So the median household income in Jacksonville is like $68,000, but to be able to purchase a house here, you need to make $124,000. So it has to be like a dual income married couple to be able to afford a median price home. But you're building homes in like the 200s, right? Where somebody who is single, who's making, 60, 70,000 would be able to probably purchase one of your properties. Is that right?
These are in rougher parts of town. So as you're talking, as I was listening to you talk right now, I'm wondering if this affordability uh, issue is going to start to potentially gentrify parts of downtown Jacksonville. It certainly hasn't happened yet, but yes, we're selling new construction for the low 200s. Honestly, a lot of our it depends on where you are at the $300,000 price point, but we have some stuff in like the 32207 area, which is a
Yeah,
great area. And we
it is.
found that once you reach 300 on a brand new house, like it's pretty crickets there right now.
Yeah, I
So,
see I see stuff in the town center going for like $500,000 for a 2,000 square foot townhome, and I'm just like, oh man, like
wow.
they're real. It's a really hard sale, but I mean, it's because again, that just people here don't make enough money, so it'd have to be somebody relocating here who would be able to purchase. Now, here's the house prices have outpaced the income growth over the last 40 years. Here you can see the wages on the orange line and the median house price on the blue line. It's just gotten to a point where it's out of control.
Yeah.
This goes to the peak around 2023, and it's different. It's not like it used to be. And I know the boomers just say work harder, but the reality is it's like three times harder to purchase that house, three times more, even when they had higher rates, just because the pricing dynamics between their wages and the price of the house were just completely different. And so the wages are just not keeping up here. And we need the migration to Florida to continue with wealthy people moving here for us to have a chance at being able to sell these type of real estate.
The favorite thing for boomers to say is, "Oh, all these people think 6.8% interest rates are bad. My first house, I paid an 18% interest rate." And it's like, I get
House
that
was also $60,000 and your salary was like 40, or whatever.
100%.
Yeah.
That's not a valid statement. Like we appreciated 52% in the last 5 years here in Jacksonville, like you said. And interest rates at that time during appreciation were in the high twos, threes. Now we've doubled, and house prices, at least for a while, did not drop that much. We are coming back down now, but if you look at national averages outside of Jacksonville, it hasn't dropped that much. What's the number? 2 or 3% nationally?
Sometimes they're actually in the Northeast, it's still going up
Yeah. It's still going up.
because they didn't overbuild, right? They didn't have the mass migration that popped up the prices. They have higher wages in the Northeast. So this is a great like housing inventory by region, right? So the South is specifically seeing this inventory spike where we had this massive speculation, right, from investors. A lot of the areas that are getting hit the hardest right now are from those areas that are the institutional investors. You think about the Arizona areas. I mean, it's just like unbelievable how much they built. They're all cookie cutter
Arizona's
houses.
hot.
It's hot. Florida is also very hot, and we have a lot of overbuilding here. But we're seeing this massive inventory spike versus the Northeast, the Midwest, which are kind of not as bubbly as the South here. It seems like we kind of go on these wild rides here in the South, like a boom bust type of a period. This is a great chart. It comes from the author calculations AEI, and it basically can show like where prices are already falling, prices likely to fall in 1 year, and prices are more resilient. I feel like this chart's actually 6 months behind, even though it's like a brand new chart that came out. But there's several cities that are at risk of near declines, and it's basically Texas, Georgia, and Florida. Florida is the number one. Arizona, you can obviously see some areas of Colorado. There's about 8 states that are getting really hit. There's only certain pockets of California that are getting hit, but you can see the Northeast is still just doing totally fine. They're actually seeing where prices are moving up. And again, this is just a matter of supply and demand, even with the rates being static across the board.
One thing I'd say about Jacksonville specific though is I see that circle is bigger, so I'm assuming that means that prices are falling faster than maybe Southwest Florida, Punta Gorda area, which Punta Gorda is the worst market
That's ground zero.
in America. And I don't know if this chart is just like it already has fallen so much, maybe it doesn't have too much further to go. And I don't know that I agree with Jacksonville's circle being as big as it is. I would tell you that of our 80 list, like we are moving stuff. Of our 80 listings, like we are getting showings because stuff's priced right. It is not deadlock here by any.
If it's priced right. So you said that's the key thing. So it's so funny when I talk to my agents, I'm like, just chop off another 50 and it'll sell. And they're like, I can't get them to convince them to chop off another 50. I'm like, just 150K more and it'll sell tomorrow. They'll drop it 50K and they'll literally have 4 offers the next day. There, like you said, there are buyers, but but the seller has to be realistic. And as you said, it can't sit for like more than a week without a showing. Otherwise, you really need to get that price drop, because going into the end of the year, we're going to have a ton of seasonality. I think we will see inventory start to stack up and buyers slow down even more. So if you haven't sold yet, like you need to get on that right away, because once the holidays come around, it's going to be basically crickets until next March.
Is that what you're telling your agents? If you don't have showings for a week, there should be red flags?
Yeah, so we say, really the study showed, if you have no showings for 14 days, you need to price drop automatically. Or if you have 10 showings with no offers, you need to do a price drop. That's like the standard in this market, because the problem is your neighbor is going to cut their house price. So, you need to watch what your neighbors are doing, and you need to be priced the most competitively against your neighbor. Even if you just cut, if they undercut you, you need to undercut them, because there are some sellers who are panic selling right now because they see what's happening, and that's dragging down everything in the neighborhood. And then the rest of the houses are just sitting. So there's going to be one seller that's more desperate than everybody else that will capitulate. So the best thing is to just be the first seller. If you actually have to sell, you need to be priced the most competitively and be the best condition to move it as fast as possible.
We try to be that most desperate person on all of our listings. So
bring them offers. That's what I heard. And stress is showing up for the Florida in Florida. So this might be good for flippers right down the line. Once the stress has cycled through the system, this is year-over-year change in serious mortgage delinquency rates by state. So obviously Florida is one of the worst in the country for delinquencies. And it's gone up a little bit. Obviously, we haven't had any sort of foreclosures for FHA and VA loans because of the situation we had in 2020, where you could just get loan loss mitigation workouts with the bank and just basically put your payments on the back end. But that's over in October 1st. So we're actually going to probably see a wave of foreclosures. We're starting to see a ton of short sales, but we're starting to see a lot of distress. Pat, is this an opportunity for flippers to come in and start buying, or is it too early?
I'm not seeing that. I watched the foreclosure auction, and you say it's coming.
It's coming. October 1st is when it's lifted, and that's when the banks will actually start working through the FHA, which, by the way, the FHA serious delinquency rate is 15.3%. That's about 6,000 properties in Jacksonville that would be seriously delinquent at this point.
So why are these people delinquent? They either bought in a high market at a very low interest rate at a payment they can afford, or they bought at a time where things were a little more stable and just lost their jobs or something. I don't. That's why I don't see the foreclosure wave coming, because I feel like people either have low rates and bought too high, and or they're just good. They bought in the teens.
These are normal delinquencies that have been delayed for 5 years,
Okay.
if that makes any sense. So it's just they have not processed through any of the, let's say a 0.5% of properties just go to foreclosure generally every single year. They haven't done any for 5 years. My attorney at our title company says that he's seen it basically triple in the last 2 months in the number of foreclosures that the banks are reaching out for to start processing. So there is a lot of issues. The people who bought obviously in 2023, 2024 that just bought right at the peak and they're now underwater or they need to short sale, we're seeing properties through our brokerage start to go through the foreclosure process with the list pendants and trying to figure out a workaround, either a modification or a short sale. So we are starting to see that type of distress, because you got to understand the majority of the people who are buying were like in 2022, right at the peak, 2023. I mean, there's tens of thousands of homes that transacted here locally that are going to have distress basically at this point in the market or over the next 12 months.
I still watch the foreclosure auction. Still being sold at numbers that I don't agree with, that I don't think you can make money on right now.
Yes.
And if you get a little more foreclosure auction volume, there's still so much capital on the sidelines that there is a backstop. There's a backstop for all of them. All 6,000 that you're talking about, there is a backstop for every single one of those at a number. So I think mom and pop flippers, you're still going to have to grind to find stuff, and margins will still be pinched. I don't think there's this massive opportunity. If you're going to ask me locally where the opportunity is over the next 12 months, it's the thing that no one sees and is very unexciting. But I do believe in Jacksonville downtown. I don't know if the timeline is 5 years, 10 years, 15. I don't know, but we can still buy lots in Jacksonville in the urban core for $5,000 to $10,000, and there's no buyers for that. And can you make money off that right now? Not really. We're squeezing out a little bit of margin. It's a very unexciting investment, but I do believe what happened in Atlanta will happen in Jackson. I think those will be $65,000, $70,000 lots down the road that you can buy for 5 or 10. Every time I speak at a conference and people find out that I can buy infill lots in Jacksonville for 5 or 10 grand, the response is buy as many as humanly possible. What else do I think is coming? I think there's a lot of developers that put land under contract or closed on it in 2020, 2021, 2022, and there are now no buyers for those entitled lots. So I think the price of entitled lots, be it townhouse or single family in Jacksonville, has to come down. And there may not be a play for it right now, but I think those are the two opportunities that I'm very deep looking at. Infill lots in rougher parts of town at numbers that are, if I buy a lot for 5 grand and the market drops 50%, it's worth $2,500, right? Like you don't like there's not much pain there. And if you can buy entitled lots for 15, 10, 15 grand, which we're not there yet, not even close, but that's also a great opportunity for when things turn. You have those lots in the background. But as far as buying houses, big opportunities in buying houses right now, almost every flipper that I know has stopped buying and started just wholesaling. And it's like there's a wholesale operation here locally that it's like all the normal guys aren't buying. We're only selling to people that are like doing their first flip or like
Yes.
interested in the Jacks market. Those are your only people that are buying houses right
People who
now.
don't understand the market are.
Right. Or the transactional costs or how hard money works or that sort of thing. So it's a very bad time to get into flipping, I think.
Yeah, I think you said it well. I mean, with these lots, I do think there's a lot of opportunity there because there's a wave of growth happening in that area. So you want to be in the path of growth when you own those lots. And I think there's so much investment going into downtown. I think that will be a good long-term play. So I definitely agree with that. Buy, wait, pay taxes,
Yeah.
hope nothing.
Mow the lawn.
Yeah, don't get a citation from the city. But here's the thing, we're looking at the loans with DTI greater than 43%. 65% of FHA buyers are more than 43% in their debt to income ratio. So the buyers are just absolutely slammed with, look at the debt on the VA folks who are processing through. It's the consumer is tapped out. This is my biggest concern actually about being delayed in housing. Even if we have rates come down, the amount of student loans that people have, the younger generations, we see that the median age of the first time home buyer is 38 years old. People are delayed getting married. It's just like one of those times they're delaying having kids. There's household formation actually went negative this month for the first time in, like 7-8 years. Where it's a really interesting time where I hope that obviously this will eventually come back with prices coming down, though I still see there being some sort of credit crisis with just how much debt people are loaded up with, especially on the credit card side. Look at this, the credit card delinquencies are worse than the tech bubble already, which is kind of mind-boggling. The student loan delinquencies are skyrocketing, across the United States, and obviously you're going to start garnishing wages. I think that's also October 1st that's coming through. And this is what we were referencing earlier, buying a home in 1985 versus 2022, right? That the difference is, they have like a 4x multiple. We have, a 7 to 8x multiple. It's just like much more difficult to be able to purchase a median price hold home, depending on the demographic that you have.
And
This is
with all that micro data that you put up, I agree that the consumer is tapped. I agree that everything looks in the future, but where are you at on the macro level of this too shall pass, right? This won't last forever. I think you believe in Jacksonville and Florida long term, this kind of the same way I do. We will come out the other side. Things will correct somehow. Is there anything that jumps out to you when I ask you, when are we on being at the growth side? Again, like what needs to happen?
Well, so people need to keep watching this channel because once I start buying, I'm going big. So, I'll tell you what I'm doing. I've been very honest about what I have done in my projections of what I think is going to happen in the future. I've been very fortunate to be on a lot of points. If I get it wrong, I'll tell you where I was wrong. Just like earlier, I thought that we would have a ton more active listings on the market that we don't have because I didn't expect this like rage cancellation from people who are upset that they can't get the price that they want and they're just going to stay in their oversized house. Now, I mean, I don't have any good data. I have no good demographic. I studied all 6 of the variables in a deep dive of housing, and I cannot find one single variable in Florida specifically that was going to be good for the next 3 to 4 years. Beyond that, it's just you have to watch the data as it passes. I think, I don't think we're going to see this 30% decline from the peak in the next year. This stuff is slow. It moves slow. I think it's going to take 3 years. If it's 2025 today, I think we're going to see bottom around the end of 2027. And then once the numbers make sense, I mean, I'm planning to gear up and buy everything, right? I'll be doing everything. We have the resources, we have the capital, we have the agents to be able to do it. And I'll let everybody know what we're doing, what we're looking at, and where the opportunities are. And maybe you can be part of it, So it's one of those things that I'm just going to take it day by day. But right now, it is a bloodbath. As you mentioned earlier, it's bad. It's hard for flippers. It's hard for private lenders because the private lenders can't, underwrite a deal. The flippers ran out of cash. They barely have enough money for a down payment. So, we had a lending fund. We're giving out tons of loans to real estate agents to do flips. And I haven't had one come across my desk in like 3 months that actually made sense from a financials perspective when I underwrite it and I tell them not to do the deal. So I'm always looking out for them. But, it can change. Things change fast. If I know anything about this market, if the Fed actually does reduce rates by, 2% and we see mortgage rates come down 2% and we see prices come down another 10%, that could be another scenario that, things aren't as bad as my projection. I think it's completely dependent on interest rates. Interest rates are responsible for up to 70% of home price appreciation. So, if we can get the rates lower, which I don't see why rates would go lower because our deficit is blowing out and the spending is wild and inflation is likely to come in, into next year with how much we're spending and the delayed impact from tariffs, I think will eventually show up. So I just, everything I see from a finance and economics perspective, I'm not optimistic about the future, the near-term future. Long-term, of course, it's not going to matter, right? If you're thinking in 20-year periods, decades, this isn't going to matter. This is a temporary blip on the big picture of things. But if you're trying to time the market in and out, this is not the time to think that you're going to get, 10% appreciation next year.
Yeah, you know, let me just follow up on what you said about lending because I know your background in the capital markets and I'm curious your opinion on this as well. If there is one positive data point for flippers and home builders like me right now, it is the lending market. I was in New York last week, met with a couple of our lenders and a couple of funds that we still deal with, and the feedback there is the capital markets cannot get enough RTLs right now, residential transition loans, meaning bridge debt on flips and institutional operators like us getting vertical debt on new construction. They are selling like hotcakes all day. This was not the case in 2008. These businesses didn't exist back then, but right now that the pricing on my vertical debt for construction is almost getting commoditized because the capital markets want it so bad. So it's just going down, down, down. If you want bridge debt on a flip right now, you have a shitload of options. I have a ton of options on the vertical debt side. So what I'm thinking through is right, like capital markets hate single family right now, especially in Florida. They I don't want to be the person swimming up current. We had a lot of success with the flipping company because we were swimming with the current, with the
Yes.
trend. Capital markets loved single family real estate and we made a lot of money because of it. Right now, I am not aligned with what the capital markets want on the product side, but I am using something they really want. So that's something I'm thinking through as well. It's good to go with the trend as a business owner, and it's not good to just try to swim hard against the currents. And I'm thinking, how can I leverage that a little more? So that is the one positive news for flippers and small builders. If you can find the deals, the debt is readily available and it's cheap. It is cheap. It is very comparable to bank financing.
Okay, so it's like 6.57.
No,
Right.
and the banks aren't at 6.5 or 7. I think our bank line of credit for vertical construction is prime plus 1, so we're mid to low 8s,
Yeah, eight and
and
a half.
this debt that I'm getting from non-bank lenders, I'm below 9. I'm below
That's
9 and a point, and it's only getting lower because they're willing to, to do these loans cheaper because they know they have an immediate out on the back end in the capital markets. Like if you can package up these in groups of 50, 100, like there's 20 bids for it. So those prices are getting pushed out.
Yeah, they need the demand for it, and the problem is they're not getting the demand filled. They're
No
begging
way.
for right? Because everybody's cutting their rates because they still wanna get their capital out. They still want their jobs on a day-to-day basis. So a lot of my friends, what they do is they'll give you the loan and then they'll immediately sell it to somebody else and make 3 to 4% spread and maybe a strip on the rate. And they're just like, I can't find enough of this stuff.
Yeah,
They're saying the same thing because you can't find as many deals to flip at this time. It's just
absolutely.
not the market environment where you can make a quick 30 grand in 3 months. It's
There's
just not.
not enough builders like us doing enough, institutional level builders like us doing enough volume to feed that machine. So what's the opportunity there? I don't know.
Well, I think you answered those questions, Pat. So we don't need to dig into this more. But Pat, I'll drop your information below about your company in the description. I also have a Substack newsletter with 27,000 readers. And if you want to, I talk about things on there that I can't talk about on YouTube. So if you want to go and subscribe to my Substack, you can go down below and check that out as well. Pat, thanks for sharing today. Awesome presentation and awesome info. Glad you're doing what you're doing here in Jacksonville.
Thanks, John. It was
All
fun.
right. See you later.